Noun. Medical. A type of cognitive verbal communication loss characterized by the inability to express ideas in spoken words. Squaw! Hello, friendos! It's your Commander-in-Chief, Billy G here, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander. It is officially October, which means it is officially the month of Spoop. As such, we got a deck for this month's Spicy Deck Tech of a spoopy character from Theros Beyond Death, who doesn't really get a lot of love because she's a black enchantress. She's our enchanting harpy, Aphemia the Cacophony. What was that? Cacophony. Now, before we get into this, if you like deck techs, definitely consider subscribing below. I'd love to have you folks join us going forward. And consider hitting that like button while you're down there, too. Big old thumbs up helps the channel quite a lot. I would greatly appreciate it. And I've even included a deck list down there, just in case you folks want to check it out at your leisure. And you'll also find a TCG Player affiliate link. In case you don't want to buy the whole deck, if there's only a handful of cards that you're looking to get, use that affiliate link. It won't cost you a single cent more, but it would definitely help out the channel. Now, with all that said, let's get into this deck list. Aphemia the Cacophony. 1 and a black for a legendary enchantment creature harpy. That's a 2/1 with flying. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile an enchantment card from your graveyard. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, the benefits of this particular type of commander is a very low CMC. Being able to get out early means we can start taking advantage of her effect early. But her effect also requires us to have a developed graveyard with enchantments in it. So, we've built this deck around a whole bunch of enchantments and ways to get those enchantments into the graveyard. So, as we do with our decks here, we got to start with the ramp. Black is not necessarily known for the best ramp or the most accessible ramp, but the ramp it does have is pretty good. So to start out here, we have 2 artifact creature things that can get us some basic lands. We got Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum, Sad Robot, that can also draw us a card when he dies. We also have 2 mana doublers. We got Cryptghast, which also has Extort on it, and Narcana Revenant, which you can also pay to make it bigger. And then we have some mana rocks. We got Arcane Signet, Charcoal Diamond, and Soul Ring. Just quick, easy, cheap mana rocks that we can get out there to start help casting our spells. And then lastly, we have two enchantments, because that's what the deck wants to see, that reward us in mana when creatures die. So we have Black Market, and we also have Revel in Riches, which can act as an alternate win con if we get a little bit lucky. Now, being in black, we also have access to some really good removal. Much better removal than we necessarily have in ramp. So we have things like Crypt Rats and Pestilence. These are things that can do communal damage to everything, depending on how much black mana we put into it. We have board clears like Black Sun Zenith, which distributes -1/-1 counters and shovels back into our deck for reusability. We have Crux of Fate, which can let us destroy all the dragons, if there's a dragon player out there, or all the non-dragons for pretty much everything else. We have Life's Finale, which can also remove scary things from a specific player's deck as well. And Phyrexian Scriptures, which is a saga which can eventually go boom to destroy all non-artifact creatures. We have Doomwake Giant, which can be a board clear if you play enough other enchantments in a turn to give everything -1/-1. And then we have some ways to handle other people's graveyard synergies, because we will be putting a lot of stuff in their graveyard. We don't want them taking advantage of that. So we have Fairy Macabre, which you can discard to exile a couple of things. And we have Timrit, Chosen from Death, which is essentially the Black Skoos, and can give you some life if you start exiling some creatures. We also have Plague Crafter and Dictative Erebos, which can turn your sacrifice creatures into their removal as well. Seal of Doom and Sinister Concoction are 2 enchantments that are targeted removal that we have to sack and put into our graveyard to use them, which interacts with our commander there. And then we have some things to kill the small things. We got Elspeth's Nightmare, and Vampire's Kiss can get rid of the smaller stuff. And then we also have some other orders that can just kill things, with Parasitic Implant, which can also give us a bug, Quag Sickness, and Yoke of the Damned. Lastly, we have 2 actual spells, not like enchantments or creatures or stuff to help get rid of stuff, and that's going to be Feed the Swarm, the new common from Zendikar Rising, which can also get other players' enchantments, and Murderous Cut, which we can delve our graveyard away to help make cheaper. Next, we do need to somehow fill our hands. We're going to be doing a lot of discarding and casting of spells. We got to be able to keep our grip full. So we have a bunch of accessible card advantage here. We have Ayara, first of the Locthwain. I don't know how to say that word. Which sacks creatures to draw. We have Erebos, Blackhearted, and Midnight Reaper, both of which can draw you some cards when creatures die. Siphon Mind, which is potentially a 3-card swing. It makes, if you got all your opponents out there and they all discard a card, you're drawing 3 cards. We have Erebos, God of the Dead, and Greed, which both let you pay mana and life to draw cards. We have Dead Man's Chest, which is I think this is one of the spiciest cards in this deck. As an enchantment, you can put on a creature, and when that creature dies, you exile cards from the top of that creature's controller's library, and essentially acts like a giant Conti, where you can cast those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you can pay any mana to cast them. So you can stick it on one of your opponent's creatures, and it's a grab bag. It's a surprise of what you might get. We have Marchese's Decree, which brings the Monarch mechanic into the game. Everybody loves the Monarch mechanic. It's a lot of fun. It adds another layer to the game. And then we have Omen of the Dead and Palace Siege. Both of these cards are able to bring things back. Omen of the Dead can do it once. Palace of the Siege, if you choose the right mode, can do it every turn. Otherwise, you can choose that one to just drain your opponents off slowly and steadily. And then we have a handful of cards here that essentially you pay 1 life, you draw 1 card. You have Dread Presence, which does it whenever you landfall. When a swamp enters the battlefield under your control, you can choose to draw a card or gain life. Or, kind of like with Palace, you can choose to drain people instead. Phyrexian Arena, which gives you an extra card at your upkeep, but costs you the life to do it. And Underworld Connection, which you can essentially turn a land into a draw engine by tapping it, paying 1 life, and drawing a card off that land. And like I said earlier, we have some discard in here as well. We're drawing cards. We want our opponents to be discarding cards. So we do have a handful of things that care about discarding here. Gibbering Descent and Necrogen Mists. These are 2 enchantments that force people to discard a card at their upkeep. And then we also have Liliana's Caress and Painful Quandary, which forces people to discard when they do certain actions. Liliana's Caress, they lose life when they discard the card. And then Painful Quandary forces an additional cost to their spells of either discarding a card or draining life. And then last we have Thoughtrender Lamia. This is the constellation so that whenever an enchantment enters under your control, your opponents need to discard a card. We will have plenty of enchantments coming in under our control with this deck. Then we have some nondescript life loss. These are just good ways to get rid of things. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Gary. He will drain equal to Devotion when he enters the battlefield and also help buff your life if yours is getting a bit low. We have Grim Guardian, which is a constellation, so whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, it will drain. And Lampad of Death's Vigil, which can drain people for 1 whenever you sacrifice a creature. And we should have plenty of tokens and whatnot we can work with to sack some creatures here. Now, since the graveyard's going to be full, we do have some reanimation to our fingertips to use here. We have the Eldest Reborn and Ever After, all can reanimate things from your graveyard and even for some other graveyards. And then we have 2 very similar auras that I think are pretty cool. We have Minions Return and Unholy Indenture, both of which you can enchant one of your creatures or one of your opponent creatures, and when that creature dies, you get to return it to the battlefield under your control. Pretty neat. Now, beyond the discarding, beyond the draining, beyond the making of the zombies with our commander, we have other ways to make zombies, because that's really how this deck wins here, is by getting a whole bunch of zombies. So in order to make those zombies, we have things like Grave Titan. We have Curse of Disturbance, which also benefits people to attack somebody in particular. Endless Ranks of the Dead to really multiply those zombies later in the game. Timric Calls the Dead, make some zombies. And Zombie Infestation to turn any extra cards we have in hand into more zombies. And then once we have all these zombies out there, we got to make them stronger. So we got Lord of the Accursed, Graph Harvest, and Liliana's Mastery. All kind of Lord-like effects to make our zombies a bit more difficult to hit and hit a little bit harder. Now, lastly, every deck needs lands because we're not playing Manaless, Dredge, and Legacy, even though that deck is a lot of fun. So we have a couple lands that ramp us a bit. We got Cabal Stronghold, and we got Myriad Landscape, both of which can either get us some extra land or tap for extra mana depending on how many swamps we have. Then we have some graveyard hate in our land base. We got Bajuka Bog and Scavenger Grounds. I have talked about Scavenger Grounds enough times in this channel, but in this particular deck, you want to be a little bit more concerned because you use your graveyard as well, so you'll need to be a little bit more careful when using it. And then we got some lands that make us some zombies. We got Cradle of the Accursed and Dunes of the Dead, one of which you can sack to make a zombie. One of them will just naturally make a zombie when it goes to the graveyard from the battlefield for other reasons. So let's say you sack it to Scavenger Grounds. You can get a zombie out of that. Then we also have just some upcycling lands here. We got Barren Moor and Desert of the Glorified. And then we got some removal lands. We got Field of Ruin, which can remove a non-basic land of your opponents. And If Near Dead lands, which can get rid of a tiny creature or make other creatures a little bit weaker. And then we have 26 swamps. And that wraps up Aphemia, the Cacophony deck tech. So, how do you win with this deck? Well, like I said earlier, zombies. They're going to be our primary win condition. You control the board with removal. You got enough board clears. You got enough way to kind of keep your opponent's boards in check. And then you just build up your zombie army and attack with them. But this deck, it's despite just having kind of that one game plan, it plays differently each time. Because of the effects like Minion's Return, Indentured Servant, Dead Man's Chest, you have access to your opponent's cards, which means every game could play differently and be a lot of fun. Being able to play with cards that aren't in your deck is a lot of fun. In fact, there was one time we were playing with this deck against a regular Enchantress deck, and using the one of the auras, we were able to steal Citizen Champion. Now this deck, with an actual Enchantress effect in it, just goes off, and it's insane. And you can do that, like, it extends beyond just taking a Citizen Champion. You could take any important Cogworth creature of your opponents and just start playing with it, and it's just a blast. And like, as of right now, this deck is about mid 150, about $150 if you order it on TCG Player, which is a very good entry level price for a deck. And there are plenty of upgrade paths in it. You can get your Cabal covers and your Lakes of the Deads and your other very expensive, your Necropotence and stuff like that to really buff the deck up. But even just at this budget level, this deck has a lot of play to it and is a lot of fun. Now, that said, I want to hear from you folks. I want to know if any of you actually built an Aphemia deck. I don't think many people out there. There's less than 100 of these decks on EDH Rec. So if you built one of these decks, definitely let me know in the comments below. And it would definitely behoove me here to remind you folks about our Month of Spoop giveaway, where we are giving out this Aminatou sealed Commander 2018 Subjective Reality deck. Check out my video from last Friday. I'll include a link to it down below because it'll have all the details regarding that giveaway. And yeah, while you're down there below, if you like this deck list, hit that like button, hit subscribe. You need to be subscribed to enter that competition there. So hit subscribe and leave a comment about what you would do with your Aphemia decks, or what commander would you replace in your mono black deck list? There's a lot of cool ones out there. I would like to hear from you. Beyond that, thanks for stopping by. It was a pleasure having you folks today. I hope to see you again in the future. And yeah, just take care for now, folks. Adios.